This story starts a long time ago, 226 years ago, in a place called Ireland. In 1795, that's 226 years ago this year, in a place called Mayo, in the north of Connacht, so about 2 hours drive north from Galway, in a town called Ballina. And Mr. Leonard grew up just about 12 kilometres away, near a town called Killala. So this is a story close to my heart as well. In the town of Ballina, in 1795, a man called Edward Blewett was born. Now, Edward Blewett was not a poor man, because he obviously got quite a good education. And when Edward grew up, he got a job with the Ordnance Survey that was going on in Ireland in the 1830s. Here in this picture, you can see a photo of some of the crew of the Ordnance Survey that were working for the British government, which ruled Ireland at the time, to map all of Ireland. They did an amazing job. You can see some of their instruments there that they were working with. They had no satellite, no GPS, no electronics, nothing powered by electricity whatsoever. Yet they managed to make maps that showed pretty much everything. The first map that we looked at was Google Maps, which is composed of satellite imagery taken from space. This map that you're looking at right here was made by Edward Blewett and other men like the men in the photographs we were looking at in the 1830s, so 180 years ago about. And if you think that this map is very old-fashioned looking, well, let's zoom in and see the sort of detail that this map showed 180 years ago. Now, is that starting to look like a pretty modern map to you? There is Galway, there is Salthill, there is Mutton Island, and we have Rahoon up here. We have all the roads leading into and out of Galway. We have the River Corrib leading down from the Corrib, and if we zoom out, we see Galway Bay, we see the Aran Islands, we see the exact depths of all the waters in Galway Bay mapped out, and we keep zooming out, and we see great detail. Now, these people managed to make these maps without airplanes, satellites, electronics of any kind, just using the kind of instruments that I showed you in the photo a moment ago. And if we travel north from Galway on this map, we see the town of Ballina. And Edward Blewett, the man that I'm talking about, the man whose photo you saw in the first picture, would have helped to make this exact map that we're looking at right now. Travelling the country, walking fields, up hills, measuring exact distances between the tops of hills and how the land rose and fell, and finding the exact heights. You can see them marked here: 141, 148, 79, 109, 59. They were all measured in feet in those days, not in meters. 170, 69. And they really did a remarkable job. So it's clear that Edward Blewett was very well educated and also quite a clever person, because he was able to work with the Ordnance Survey at the time. To go back to our slideshow, we see Edward Blewett here. We see the Ordnance Surveyors at work. But then we see the Ballina workhouse. Now, you already learned that the workhouses played a very important role in the famine. They were the only place that people at the start of the famine and throughout much of the famine who were starving and poor and evicted could go to try and get some sort of help. The Ballina workhouse was built to accommodate about 1,000 people, but by 1847 there were over 3,000 people in this building that you see here. Edward Blewett got a job, because he was an engineer and a surveyor. He actually got a job with the public works when they were established in Ballina. You'll remember this was the system where poor people were forced to work in order to get money, to get food. There was no charity in those days from the government. So Edward Blewett actually worked on the public works around Ballina, and he oversaw them for a number of years. It must have been a very, very difficult time because many, many thousands of people died in the area during the famine. I think it must have been a very, very difficult time because by 1850, Edward had decided to leave Ireland forever with his wife and his children. One of his sons, Patrick, was actually already 18 by the time they left. And in 1850 and 1851, the family sailed to New York. They took a ship called the Excelsior, and they travelled the 6-week journey across the Atlantic Ocean to land in New York. You'll remember we were looking at some of the passenger lists of the ships that sailed from Galway earlier on in the week, and one of you came across a person who was listed as a gentleman on the ship. Now, I don't know if Edward counted as a gentleman, but he would certainly have not been listed as a labourer or a farmer. He would have been listed possibly as a surveyor or an engineer. Edward followed an awful lot of other Irish people at the time who were travelling to a place in Pennsylvania, not far outside New York, called Scranton. Now, this still happens today where families will move from one country to another. So say people might move from a country to Galway, and then they'll send word home to say, I've got a place in Galway and you can come and stay with me for a while you get a job and get set up in Galway. So it turns out that then an awful lot of people from one area end up emigrating to the same place. And this happened in Scranton in the late 1800s. Loads and loads and loads of people from Mayo and Sligo went to Scranton, and loads and loads and loads and loads more people from Mayo and Sligo went to Scranton following them, because they would have got letters home from them saying, I'm set up here now, I have somewhere to stay, and if you come over you could stay with me until you get a job, and then we'll get set up. And that snowballed on into the late 1800s, and Scranton had a huge Irish population at the time. In fact, most of the emigrants in Scranton in the late 1800s were not only from Ireland, but mostly from Mayo and Sligo. So Edward Blewett would have felt right at home over there. He probably knew a lot of people over there already by the time he landed. And his son Patrick also came with him, and his other children and his wife. And Edward got a job as a land surveyor over there, again mapping land in Scranton. So it wasn't a tough job like the jobs that most of the Irish people had to do, because most of the Irish people that arrived in Scranton ended up working on the coal mines or on the railroads. And you can see here a picture on the left of some men working in a coal mine. It was extraordinarily tough work. Some people say it's the hardest work that was ever invented, working in complete darkness all day long in a very, very dangerous and tough job. The coal was taken from Scranton and exported on the railroads, which were being built all around America at the time. And you'll see a picture of a rail yard in Scranton there on the right hand side. And here we have a picture of some of the ordinary workers in Scranton. These would have been people that when they arrived into New York would have listed their jobs as labourers. Now if you look closely you can see that these guys are very, very dirty, and they have been working extremely hard. This was not an easy life for them, and an awful lot of them would have died young from disease and from dust inhalation and from hard work and from not eating well. Now, whoopsie, didn't want to show you that one. Oh, that was a bit of a giveaway. We'll see, can we go to something else first of all, because I want to go to this. And if we zoom in here, you can see on the right hand side of this family tree that I have here, you have Edward Blewett, born 1795. And we know that Edward married Mary Muldoon. And then Edward's son Patrick, whom I mentioned earlier on, who was actually 18 when they moved to Scranton in Pennsylvania, he married Catherine Scanlon. And like most other families that moved to America, they also had children. And their son was Edward Francis Blewett, who married Mary Ellen Stanton. And then their daughter, Geraldine Blewett, married a man called Ambrose J. Finnegan. Now, the Finnegan side of the family were also Irish. They were from County Louth, but that's a whole other story that we're not going to get into today. And Ambrose and Geraldine then had a daughter called Jean, or Catherine Eugenia Finnegan, who married a man called Joseph R. Biden Sr., and they were both born about 100 years ago or so. Now, Joseph and Jean, or Jeannie, as I think her son calls her still, had a son, and that son's name is Joe Biden Jr. Jr. because his father was Joe Biden Sr. And it says on this family tree that was made a few years ago that he was the 47th Vice President of the United States, but I think you might know him a little better today as whoopsie. Oh, go back, Mr. Leonard. As somebody who became the President of the United States of America just yesterday. So Joe Biden is actually descended from a man who left County Mayo, Ballina, in 1850, and his descendant became the President of the United States of America. So, although the story of the Irish leaving Ireland during the famine is a very, very sad one, all around the world, many, many people consider themselves very, very proud of their Irish heritage, and many of them went on to do great things, including this man here in front of you, who became the President of the United States of America. Now, if I have time tomorrow, I might tell you another story about my connection to Scranton, but we'll leave that for now. So please move on to the next activity and answer the questions. Thank you.